And it's about respecting the subject of what you shoot. And that's how I was raised, period, whether it was photography or not. You respect who you're speaking to or dealing with, and you'll gain some respect back. My photographs represent that.
Let's talk about something that you've been looking forward to for quite some time, the re-release of your book.
So back in 2008, I was fortunate enough to put out my first book called Born in the Bronx with my dear, dear friend Johan Kugelberg, who I met through Grandmaster Kaz. And it was just a book of love. I call it a scrapbook of me growing up, taking pictures in the Bronx that happened to include the birth of this $billion industry we call hip hop. And it was a huge hit. 10,000 books were done through Rizzoli. Rizzoli is one of the biggest publishing companies in the country. They took a chance with us, their first hip hop book, and it was a huge success. I traveled the world because of the book, did exhibitions all over. I mean, this kid you're talking to right now, I've been to Bulgaria. How fucking cool is that? I've been to Japan, London, Germany, Korea. I've been all over the world because of my photography, all because of this book, Born in the Bronx. And it was such a huge success. And it's been referred to as the Bible of hip hop culture. That it was long overdue. And, there had been conversation over the years of re-releasing it, either in a digital form or just the way it was first laid out. But if you know anything about the publishing world, it's a hard business. You really need some serious capital to put out a book, unless you're going to self-publish yourself and sell out of the trunk of your car, which people are doing today. But on a huge scale, it's a massive endeavor to get into. And about 2 years ago, Johan and I were approached by some good people beyond the streets. Roger Gatzman, who's a phenomenal guy who's been representing graffiti and hip hop culture for many years, and 1X Run, another phenomenal company out in Minneapolis, who's been doing phenomenal things for the past 10 years. And they were like, listen, we'll put up the capital, we'll re-release the book, but let's take it a step further and add 30 more pages and give it that extra salsa, so to speak, with some new images. And then we'll get LL Cool J, who just formed his new company, Rock the Bells, that's doing so well with their radio show and their website and honoring the pillars of hip hop. And we'll get LL to do an intro. And everything just fell into place. Everything just fell into place. And we put together an expanded version of Born in the Bronx with 30 additional pages, with additional photography from my archives. And it's another wave that I'm riding right now. It's a wave that we have to keep COVID in mind. But it's a wave that's been doing pretty well. And it's something that I can just add to my legacy, because that's what it's all about. You want to leave a legacy for your children, your grandchildren. You want to leave something that defines you as a person. And I've been able to do that with my photography. And so far, so good. It's doing well.
So in the new in the 30 new pages, what are some of the things that people can expect?
Just some never before or seen before photos from my archives. I had massed an archive of over 10,000 images during my days of hanging out with your uncle back in Michelangelo. And during the beginning of what we love today, the hip hop culture, and me being a chubby little kid with that Angela Davis afro, walking around with a camera, not knowing that I'd be documenting the birth of a genre of music that would surpass rock and roll and every other genre of music. Um, my archives sit on the same shelf as the Gettysburg Address up at Cornell University. I deposited my negatives up there a few years ago, where 10,000 of my negatives were or are digitized, and people do research on my photography. Um, I'm known as a hip hop photographer, but it's so much more than that, because besides hip hop, you have a huge chunk of images from the height of Latin music during the 70s and 80s, when I was hanging out with my dad, who was Tito Puente's personal confidant. You have a chunk of my archives that show the demonstrations and the activism that was going on when you were just a baby, and I'm, being taken with, my mother and grandmother and your grandmother to demonstrate against movies like Fort Apache, The Bronx, and other social injustices that was going on in the Bronx at the time. So it's a body of work that is just huge. And, again, first and foremost, my passion and love was photography. And it's always been photography. You know, the medical field came later on, only because I couldn't make a living from being a photographer. And when I graduated from South Bronx High School with your uncle, my goal was to become a famous photographer and travel the world and work for these huge, uh, uh, magazines and newspapers. And it never came to fruition. It did come to fruition, but it took 30 years. So in those 30 years, I got into the medical field because I had joined the Army as a combat medic. And that gave me a platform where I could retire from. But I never gave up my love and passion of photography. And, you know, it took 30 years, but, I never gave up my dream. And, again, this kid from the South Bronx, because of his photography, have been all over the world. Before the pandemic, I was supposed to go to Dubai, Amsterdam, and London, and that got shut down because of the pandemic. I mean, Dubai, that's on my bucket list to go to.
So why photography? Why did you choose photography?
Okay. um, I was that chubby little kid with, again, with that Angela Davis afro, where I wasn't as athletic as your uncle Rolando was, or your uncle David. I wasn't, didn't have the gift of gab as they did. I wasn't, an MC or a b-boy or, a DJ or anything like that. Um, and, my stepfather, Michael Caine, who was an amateur family photographer, just put the bug in me in photography. And I just ran with it. And I was the only kid in the neighborhood that walked around with a camera. And next thing you know, I became one of the most popular kids in the neighborhood because my mother allowed us allowed me to build a dark room in our bathroom because we had two bathrooms. We lived in a duplex apartment. And so I was able to take pictures that day, go home that night, develop the roll of film, and make pictures the next day and show the kids or my friends. And it just gave me that sense of, wow, art, art. So, I became popular and I just love creating and taking pictures. And that's why I have so many pictures of you and your siblings growing up because we were neighbors.
Throughout the years, you go from film to digital. The composition of the way that your photography was back then, and the things that you needed to do in order to capture an image, the texture, the lighting, and all these things that you had to take into account before shooting. Now it's automatic, right?
It's lazy man. It's a lazy man world. Everybody's a photographer.
Yeah. So I mean,
Today.
today you shooting, do you go with just the immediacy of what a camera can do, or do you go ahead and you stick to what you've always been doing?
Well, I mean, it took me a long time to transition from film to digital. It wasn't until I got offered a position with a magazine out in London that wanted to hire me to shoot New York events going on that I went digital because, what I shot today needed to be in an email blast that evening so it could be published overseas in the next day or two. Okay. So I had to not relearn, I had to adapt to technology. Like I said, everybody's a photographer today because they have this cell phone, and I'm not knocking it. This little gadget here takes some phenomenal photographs, but I still stick to the basics where that I learned growing up shooting film, and it's composition. It's about your eye, composing a shot, and it's about respecting the subject of what you shoot. And that's how I was raised, period, whether it was photography or not. You respect who you're speaking to or dealing with, and you'll gain some respect back. My photographs represent that. My photographs represent the story that I want to tell. Okay, I can go to an event and take 1,000 pictures, literally 1,000 pictures in one night because of digital photography. Okay, whereas when I was shooting film and going to these hip hop events, because it wasn't called hip hop, but hip hop, the name hip hop came later on. When I went to these jams, I would only go to, I would go with, maybe 2 rolls, 3 rolls of film. And a roll of film is 36 exposures, or in layman's term, 36 pictures. So whatever picture I was taking, it was a thought process. It was a thought process where, okay, I need to compose a shot. I need to know my lighting. I need to know if I'm going to use a flash or not. I need to measure the distance because you had to do some sort of calculations in your head because a flash mounted on your camera is only good for a certain amount of feet. I had to know what kind of lens opening, to use because your lens opening allowed a certain amount of lighting and your lens speed was the exposure time. So it was, it was a process. It was a process. And, I'm grateful that I was raised that if you love something so much, you know the history and the roots of it. So, I, learned photography in public school. or I sharpened my skills of photography in public schools. And I'm grateful for that. And that translated into me taking some iconic shots that I have in my archives. And even some shots that weren't planned that just happened by mistake because I didn't have the luxury of taking a picture and looking at the back of the camera and seeing the image. I had to wait till I got home, developed the film, and did a contact sheet. Okay. So, it was a whole process. But those skills, shooting film, translated into me the way I still shoot today. So I'll go to an event. I know what I'm going to shoot. I already know the calculations in my head, you know, and I'll set my camera that either A is going to do everything for me or B, I'm going to do myself and know and shoot. So, it's so funny. I go to these events and you have all these people with their iPhones and iPads and this, that, and the other, and they're all pushing and taking, and I'll walk by, take one shot, two shots, and keep moving. And I'll bet you $20 my shot is better than theirs because I know what I'm shooting. I know what I'm going to, the effect that I want to get or what my composition is going to be. And, that's just the way I shoot. I'm that fly on the wall taking pictures and documenting what's going on in my surroundings and not that paparazzi that has that camera in your face and just da, 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 da. That's just not me. And so when I go to these events, if I can't shoot the way I want to shoot, I'm not shooting the event. I'm not shooting because photographers come a dime a dozen and they're treated like cattle today. So you go to these big, huge 30,000 people arenas, and you get that pass and you're allowed to shoot up front, but, the promoter only allows those, 20 photographers, the first two songs of an act, and then you get hustled off to the side and then you come back with the next group. I don't shoot that way. If I can't shoot, and I tell promoters and people that put these events together, if I can't get a leave Joe Conzo the fuck alone pass, meaning leave me the fuck alone, you won't even know I'm shooting your event. I won't shoot your event. I won't. Because I know how to shoot an event, whether it's front stage, backstage, side stage, this, that, and the other, and you won't even know I'm there. Yes, I'll get a handful of posed shots, but, I'm shooting to tell a story. And that's what separates me, I guess, from other photographers. There's photographers today that I emulate, that I look up to, who came up with me: Jamel Shabazz, Martha Cooper, Ernie Panacoli, Jeanette Beckman, all these, David Gonzalez, Ricky Flores, Francisco Reyes, all these people that I emulate and look up to because we're old school and, we respect who we're shooting and we keep it moving. But we're telling a story with our images.
So
Okay.
back in the day when you were shooting the jams, did you have any idea where this art form was playing?
Let me see if I can paint this picture for you. So your uncles and I were 16, 17-year-old kids in high school. And we had went to school with some of the pillars of this culture we called hip hop. Okay. So when these jams happened, whether they were in the park or South Bronx High School gymnasium, we went. And knowing that we knew the performers, I took pictures with the only expectation of just documenting my friends who were performing, my schoolmates who were performing, with the only expectation of showing them pictures next week. That grew into, okay, now you're part of this movement. You're part of this group called the Cold Crush Brothers, because now I'm going to all their shows. We're going to take it a step further, and we're going to take your photographs and we're going to throw them out to the crowds. That gives us an edge over the other hip hop groups that were performing in the neighborhood. We're going to take it to the next level now and use your photographs and put them on flyers that are handed out every week for next week's jams. And that gives us, the Cold Crush Brothers, an edge over the other groups, because they don't have a personal photographer who's providing images to throw out to the crowds, who are now providing images to be put on flyers to be distributed in all 5 boroughs. So I had no idea that what I was doing then would become a global phenomenon. Global. I had no idea. Again, I set out to take pictures of my friends, maybe make a few dollars here and there. You know, the guys would, give me 20, 30 bucks for printing out 8x10 photos and cover the cost of me buying photographic papers and printing up pictures. And that was about it. There was no internet. There was no radio play. Pictures weren't getting published. At least my pictures weren't getting published. Because it was just a local thing that was going on that grew like wildflowers that spread throughout the boroughs, went downtown, then eventually went overseas. So I had no idea. And, again, my images sat dormant for years. And it wasn't until, I think, 1999, 2000, I got a call from Charlie Chase, the first Puerto Rican DJ, who was being filmed for a Henry Chalfant documentary called Mambo to Hip Hop. And they wanted to license one of my images. I'm like, huh? Yeah, we're willing to pay you $200 if we can use this image. I'm like, sure. Ma, you still got those negatives I left in the house? You still have those shoe boxes of negatives? She goes, yeah. And the next thing, I'm digitizing my negatives, and MTV, VH1, and everybody's calling me up and emailing me and wanting to license my images. And the next thing, I'm doing exhibitions overseas and doing books and shooting, and the rest is history. Pretty cool for a kid from the South Bronx, right?
So what would you say for an aspiring photographer or even artist, especially nowadays? Anybody starting out, anybody that's working on something that they're passionate about, what advice would you have for a person like that?
Never give up. Never give up. Have a plan B, C, D, E, F, whatever, because you got to survive, you got to eat, you got to provide for your family, but never give up. Again, if you look at my high school yearbook, under my graduating picture, my aspirations was to become a world famous photographer and travel the world and work for Playboy, UPI, all those top notch agencies or news outlets at the time. And they came true. It took 30 fucking years, but they came true. And I got to be honest with you, there's been some years where I've made more money in my photography than I did my city job. But it wasn't consistent. I needed some consistency in my life because I was raising a family and needed to pay for this roof over my head. and put food on the table. Okay? Some photographers and artists are able to do that, and God bless them. I was not one of them, but I never gave up on my passion of photography, and it's paid off. So, to the aspiring photographers out there and artists in general, is never give up. Never give up. Always adapt with the times, because every day something new is coming up. And if you can adapt your art form to fit into that space, go for it. Go for it. But, never give up. I mean, real quickly, the story of you and I, we reconnected after all these years on this on a movie set, The Get Down, because they were using my images as reference pieces. And, that was a humbling experience to have, this Netflix series use my images as reference pieces, and to actually have the director put in a small piece in the movie to reflect me at South Bronx High School taking pictures, which was so dope. So dope. But that's how you and I reconnected after all these years. And, never give up. Never give up. Education is important. And, there's no reason why you can't wear 1, 2, 3 different hats in life. There's no reason. There's no reason. And that's what I did. I wore a hat as an EMT. I wore a hat as a union activist. And I wore a hat as a photographer. And I was able to combine all three and make a living, have a career, and reap the benefits of it. So that's my word advice.
Is there anything that you'd like to add or finish before we wrap up?
No, I think I summed it up pretty much. Education before medication. Just stay involved in your community. Never give up on your dreams and hopes and aspirations. And life is funny. You're gonna get thrown all these curveballs, but that's okay, because eventually you're gonna hit that curveball out of the park. And just believe in yourself. Believe in yourself, and surround yourself around good people, strong people, and you'll be okay.
Uncle Joe Conzo. It was
Jay.
an absolute pleasure. I've been looking forward to having this conversation, this interview conversation, for quite some time.
No, this is fun. I wanna publicly thank you for all that you've been doing with your career, especially documenting. Well, not recording my mother before she passed away, and the lovely tributes that you've done for her, because those are something that I hold dear to me. And it's important to pay homage to our elders and get them on film, on camera, on digital, whatever, because they're not going to be with us forever. But if we have them recorded, we can preserve their memory. And I thank you for preserving my mother's memory, because from time to time where I need to hear her voice, I'll look at one of your videos and just, gives me inspiration. And I thank you for that.
You're absolutely welcome. And thank you again. Thank you for taking the time. Appreciate it.
My love to everybody.
Absolutely. You too.
Be safe.
Take care, man.